Hello and welcome to Knowledge by Nature. In today's video, I'm going to be giving a comparison on Dimensions Math 1B and Primary Mathematics 1B, both from Singapore Math. If this is something you're interested in, stick around. If this is your first time here, I am a homeschool mom to a first grader. I love all things books and homeschool and sharing our journey with you. And if that is something that you are interested in, I would love if you became part of the team and hit that subscribe button. If you have already hit that subscribe button, welcome back. Thank you so much. It is always really exciting to have you back and sharing our journey. Last week, I put out a video wanting to know what you wanted to see about these curriculums that I had purchased. I already had purchased Dimensions 1B, and I just had to know what primary was all about, and therefore I purchased Mathematics Primary 1B, both from Singapore Math. Everyone wanted to get a video out a little bit quicker before I actually used primary, because just a disclaimer, I have not actually used primary yet. So I cannot vouch for how I feel about teaching it because I have not used it yet. Dimensions I used for KA, KB, 1A, and then I have paused at 1B. So I do have a little bit of history with this one that I can definitely put in with this, but mostly I'm just going to compare the two so that you can see how these are. I will be doing an updated version of this later on after I have been using this a little bit so that I can tell you from a teaching standpoint, what am I seeing the biggest difference on. All right, so how this video will go is first I'm going to compare the actual two sets here as far as what materials you need to do the program, as well as we're going to look into the contents to see a comparison between Dimensions and Primary, what they both teach, and the scope and sequence of both of them, as well as we're going to look at a lesson to look a side-by-side comparison. One of the reasons I wanted to go ahead and purchase 1B, even though I have already purchased Dimensions 1B, is I wanted an exact comparison. A lot of times it would be comparing a different grade, and with this I wanted to compare apples to apples, and therefore I was able to do that by actually purchasing 1B. So yes, I've got a duplicate here, but hopefully I will gain a lot of insight from this, and hopefully it will be a tremendous help to you also. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to look at what you need to do this program. Each one you will have an instructor's guide. Currently, Dimensions Math only has a teacher's guide, where Primary Mathematics has a home instructor's guide and a teacher's guide. Singapore Math did say that they are going to be coming out with home instructor's guides for Dimensions Math. This will not start rolling out until late spring, early summer, and they will begin rolling them out per grade as they go through the years, which was one of the reasons I wanted to go ahead and compare this, because I really don't know that Dimensions 2A will be released this summer, and I don't want to wait until summer to get my curriculum purchased. So this is the one thing that is hanging in the balance for what I'm going to be going forward with for second grade. Another main thing you can see is that the size difference is quite different in the teacher's manuals, both in thickness and in the actual sizing. I will say this one, which is made for the classroom. All the activities, the teaching, everything about Dimensions Teacher's Guide is classroom oriented. This Primary Mathematics Home Instructor's Guide is 100% home instructor oriented. You can just tell from the way that they are introducing things. This is to the homeschool teacher. This is very much to the classroom teacher. Personally, this is a cumbersome book. It's a big book. And just right off the bat, I appreciate this smaller version. It's not a big deal, but something when you're just lugging around all of this stuff, everything's just a little bit bigger. So there are the teacher's guides. Up next, we have the textbooks. So we have Dimensions 1B textbook, and we have Primary Mathematics 1B textbook. I do want to draw your attention to this is the US edition. There are different editions of primary mathematics. I didn't feel that I needed to purchase every single one of these to be able to compare them, but there is a small minor difference between this edition of US edition and Common Core, and there's one more edition, I believe, maybe Standards. But again, you can see it's just a little bit bigger, not much difference, and it's a little bit thicker. The textbook is color in the primary, and the textbook is color in the dimensions. So let's set those over here. Up next is the workbook. The workbook in both primary and dimensions are black and white. No color whatsoever in the workbooks. I believe that Dimensions KA is the only one that has a colored workbook. I think from KA and KB forward, there are no colored workbooks. So just heads up on that. I don't think this makes a difference whether you go with Dimensions or primary. They're going to be black and white. Again, we have the small sizing difference where primary is slightly smaller, but not by much. Both sets have an additional booklet that you can buy that is test. I do not need the test currently. I do not feel like it's something I need to be testing at this point, and I don't have a state standard that says I need to be testing, so that is not something I purchased for either one of these. There is also an intensive practice workbook that you can buy to go along with the primary. I did not purchase that at this time. I'm just going to compare the 3 against the 3. There we are with our first initial comparison. They're really quite similar except for the sizing. Now let's get into the teacher's guides. With Dimensions, it is again for the classroom, so it is very large and it's broken up just a little bit differently. So with Dimensions, at the beginning they have the contents here, and then they come over to an introduction where it talks about the concrete, pictorial, and abstract type of teaching that Singapore Math does. Primary mathematics also teaches the exact same way. Their introduction is just at the very, very front. It's pretty much saying the exact same thing of what you're going to need as far as different materials, how it's taught, and just different features of the program. So there's not a lot of difference between the introductions. This is definitely talking more to the homeschool teacher, in my opinion. This is definitely like bulleted points, as you can see, for the teacher. Boom, boom, boom. Here, take a look at this, where this is kind of how to guide your student through. One thing that is majorly different in the way that this book is set up versus Dimensions is that this textbook is organized like a book with chapters and subchapters rather than into well-defined daily lessons. You will definitely see that difference when we get to looking at one of the lessons. And then it also breaks it down that this guide will give you a suggested amount of time in weeks to spend on each unit. For some units, your child may be able to do this work more quickly, and for others more slowly. Take the time your student needs on each topic. I will say that just my first initial impressions is that this is definitely more teacher friendly. If you need a little bit more hand holding, if you need a little bit more direction, I feel like this primary teacher's guide is giving that better than this is, just in my first initial opinion. Now let's go ahead and compare the contents. Are they teaching the same thing in Dimensions 1B as they do in Primary 1B? So with the contents here, we actually have our scheme of work kind of mixed in with the content. So we'll be looking, I do want to show you this just real quickly. What they have here is the week, and you have week 1, and then so this would be day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Week 2, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. I had seen that there was like a little bit confusion on this. For me, I kind of understand what they're doing. These are your weeks, and then we have day 1, day 2, day 3. So don't think this is day 1 and another day 1. And because this is 1B, we're starting off in a 4-day week also, I believe. So I think that would be a little bit of the difference because it is oddly numbered, and that is the biggest thing that we're going to see is the way that this the scope is kind of set out. With dimensions, it's very clear. It's lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, so on and so forth all the way. We're actually starting with like chapter 10, where we're coming in mid-year because of this 1B. I will say one of our first initial differences that we're going to see between 1B of dimensions and 1B of primary is that primary mathematics taught length in 1A. Dimensions teaches length in 1B. So the very first chapter is length. It is included in dimensions. It is not included in primary only because it already was included at 1A. So if you were coming in mid-year, you would be seeing a difference here. Now, what every single level difference there would be, I don't know. But I do know with 1B, the length has already been covered in primary, so we are not going to see that on our scope and sequence. Chapter 11, comparing, and this is where we mesh together again. So we have chapter 11, comparing, and right here we have unit 1, comparing numbers. So we can see comparing numbers, and then we have comparison by subtraction. If you come up here on dimensions, you can see subtraction as comparison is one of the sections within chapter 11. Now we're coming down to unit 2, graphs, picture graphs. That is actually included right here on chapter 11, comparison, picture graphs, and dimensions. So they're both in here. They're just split up a little bit, and you're going to see that a lot. And you're going to see a lot of just like word reversal. Comparison by subtraction is what it says in primary. Subtraction as comparison is what it says in dimensions. So it's the same thing. They're just reversing the words a little bit. All right, so we've matched up to unit 2 here. Let's go on to unit 3, numbers to 40. We have part 1, counting, right here. Right here in dimensions, we have numbers to 40. So here we are, tens and ones, tens and ones. Part 3, addition and subtraction. So here at chapter 12, they go ahead and they end at tens and ones, but we flip over to chapter 13 and we have addition and subtraction within 40. So again, everything is within 40 with primary. It just breaks it down into part 3 where it moves it over to chapter 13 for dimensions. Let's go on to part 4 where it is adding 3 numbers. If we go down through the units that's going to be in dimensions for chapter 13, we see add 3 numbers. So again, everything that is taught in part 4 of unit 3 in primary is taught in chapters 12 and 13 of dimensions. I went through here and it looked like almost everything kind of balanced out, teaching about the same thing. This is where we are going to find another difference. So here we have chapter 14, grouping and sharing. We go unit 4, multiplication. This is one thing where it does look slightly different, even though we're doing the same thing. So we say right here, adding equal groups. Right here, we are adding equal groups in chapter 14, making multiplication stories. That is not included in dimensions. That is one change. That is one difference that we are going to see between dimensions and primary. Primary is going to go ahead and introduce the times symbol and give different equations for that, where dimensions does not actually introduce the times symbol. They do 2 plus 2 plus 2 versus 2 times 3. So it's showing the multiple groupings, but does not actually make the introduction of the times symbol. Another difference that I haven't pointed out yet is that we see a review here. We're seeing a review here. If we go back to this first page, there weren't any reviews, but I don't really see any review until here on dimensions. There is practice, but as far as a set review, we don't see that until fractions, where with primary, we have had 2 reviews before we get to fractions, which brings us over into division, where we are showing the division, and then we start making halves and quarters, which would be fractions. So chapter 15, we have making halves and quarters. Here we're talking about halves and fourths and practice. So chapter 15 is, in essence, unit 6 of primary. Let's keep going. Chapter 16 is numbers to 100. Unit 7 is time. So this is another slight difference of dimensions. Covers time, but it covers it at a different time. So let's take a look at that really quickly. If we flip over here, chapter 18 is time. So they group time and money together, where primary splits time and money into two different sections. Personally, I kind of like that they brought time in the middle here, because not that time is something easy, but it's nice to get just a little bit of a break when you're looking at these bigger subjects of the math. This telling time gives a little bit of a break. One other thing I want to mention about time is that dimensions introduces a digital and an analog clock, where primary only has the analog clock. So now that we have found where time is taught in dimensions, let's keep going. We have another review, which was after the fractions and the time, and we saw that there was a review after the fractions with dimensions. We come to chapter 16, numbers to 100. Unit 8 is numbers to 100. So if we go side by side here, this would be a little bit easier to go side by side if they were kind of the same size. But we have part 1, tens and ones. You can see tens and ones is part of the unit here with chapter 16. Order of numbers, and I don't actually see that particular thing here. It could be that it's in there somewhere. It says compare numbers within 100, compare numbers to 100. So I would think this order of numbers is actually this number 4 here. So there was the orders of numbers. Then we will go on to our next part 3 of this unit, and that is addition within 100. If we look over here on dimensions, we see chapter 17 is addition and subtraction within 100. So part 3 for primary is addition within 100. Part 4 is subtraction within 100. Chapter 17 encompasses all of those. Then we have a review, and I don't see an exact review right here on dimension. To finish out the year for 1B, we have time at chapter 18 in dimensions. Again, we're seeing that with unit 7 in primary, and then both programs end with money. So we have chapter 19, money, Unit 9, money. I did take a look. Both programs show color bills, color coins. It goes up to 20. There didn't look to be a huge difference in anything with the money. Like I said, the time dimension showed a digital clock, where it did not show a digital clock in primary. Up next is our resources, and this is again another difference. With dimensions, we have black line masters, and so you will go on to dimensions.com. You will find the black line masters, which can actually be talked about right here. Dimensions has this page here where it talks about the textbook, the workbook, the teacher's guide, the test. It shows all of the students that your student will see throughout the time in dimensions. And then it shows you your online resources of black line masters, letters to home, videos, projection, material list, activities, and standard assignments. Flipping back over to primary, we see that we have answers to mental math, the appendix of mental math, and then it talks about all the manipulatives that we will need and different things that you will use for the program. This right here, mental math, is something we do not have that I am aware of in dimensions, unless it's one of these online resources. But you don't need the online resources for primary because it's all in the back of your book. So all of the little black line masters that you might use for dimensions are included here, or with your household manipulatives that you may be needing that you would use for manipulatives and things. This is the mental math that's in the very back of the book. I really, really like this. There's quite a few pages of it, and then all of the answers are over here in this appendix to the back. You can either tear these out, make a copy, or you could just point and have them say answer, answer it, answer all the way down, give it a little timed section. That's really, really nice, having this included in the back of the program and not having to print everything. Like I said, I did use dimensions before. For KA, I printed every single black line master there was. I found that I actually ended up really not needing most of them because we would use things around the house as far as different counters, little Legos, even regular playing cards. That's what we would use a lot for our black line masters. And then for 1A, I didn't actually print any. I would just go on and print them as needed. But because I had printed all of KA, most of them I didn't need. So let's keep comparing our teacher's manuals. So again, this shows all the manipulatives that you would need for primary 1B. They're saying a whiteboard or a dry erase markers, multi-link cubes, base 10 set, counters, number sets, playing cards, fact cards, 100 chart, number of cubes or dice, number chart 1 to 40, and a clock. This is very similar. They're going to tell you the exact same thing on the materials list, and when you go to the actual section of the lesson, it will tell you which ones you would use. And then the back page of that for primary just talks about some supplements as far as you can get online, and you can find different like math fact practice sheets and just a bunch of web sheets that you could go and find. For dimensions, it is talking about how to use this teacher guide. There's going to be an overview of everything, the notes that you have, the chapter opener. Each lesson has a think, learn, do, activity section, and then brainworks. So this is just kind of introducing you to what the lessons are going to be. Dimensions also has a scope and sequence for Dimensions math from pre-KA to 3B. So you can see at the beginning that there is all of this included. So if you're interested to see like what you would be learning, it's already in this book. All right, now that we have completely went through all of the contents and compared Dimensions with primary, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here for today. That way it's not insanely long, and I will then put out a part 2 where we will go through a lesson together and finish up comparing Dimensions and primary. Be sure and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss part 2 of Dimensions math versus primary mathematics. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!